At my sister's wedding reception, my mother stood up from the head table, tapped her glass, and announced to 200 guests that the down payment on my condo, every dollar of the $47,000 I had spent 4 years saving, had come from our family's generosity. She smiled when she said it. She looked right at me, and my sister laughed like it was the funniest, most natural thing in the world. I want you to sit with that for a second. Because I was standing 6 feet away, holding a glass of sparkling water, 3 months into a new job, and I had the wire transfer receipts on my phone. Every single one, from my account, to the notary, my name, my money, my life. But before I tell you what happened next, and I promise you, what came next changed everything, not just for me but for all of them, I want to ask you something. Where in the world are you watching this right now? What city? What time is it there? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. And honestly, knowing you're out there while I'm telling you this story means more than I can say. My name is Nomi. I'm 29 years old. I live in Ottawa, Ontario. And what I'm about to tell you is the most humiliating, clarifying, and ultimately freeing thing that has ever happened to me. Growing up, we were a family of 5 in a 3-bedroom semi-detached in Gloucester, the east end of Ottawa, where nobody really talks about unless they grew up there. My father worked shifts at a printing facility. My mother did bookkeeping part-time for a dental practice, and spent the rest of her hours managing the image she wanted us to project to the world. My older brother Theo, not the Theo from any story you've heard, mine, was the golden one. Loud, effortlessly charming, the kind of person who could fail a class and still somehow be the teacher's favorite. My younger sister Celeste was the baby, and the baby in our family meant she was everyone's project, everyone's priority, the one whose feeling always needed the most careful handling. I was the middle. I was the responsible one, which in our family meant I was the useful one. I started working at 15, a part-time cashier at a Loblaws near our school, mostly because I wanted my own money that no one could ask me about. I say that now like it was strategy. At the time I thought I just wanted a new jacket, but, looking back, some part of me understood very early that money in our house had a gravity to it. It pulled toward whoever needed it most loudly, and my mother had a talent for deciding who that was. When I got into Carleton for computer science, my parents sat me down and told me they were proud, but they couldn't contribute anything. Fair enough. I applied for every OSAP grant available, took out a student loan, kept my cashier job through first year, and picked up a second job doing data entry for a small logistics company in my second year. I graduated in 4 years with a 3.8 GPA and about $28,000 in student debt that I paid off in 3 years on my own. My mother told everyone her daughter graduated from Carleton with honors. She did not mention that she had funded exactly none of it. During my second year at university, I started sending money home. Not a lot, at first. $200 here, $300 there when my mother would call and explain, in that specific tone she had, the one that was never quite a question and never quite a demand, that the furnace needed servicing, or that Celeste's school trip fees were overdue, or that my father's truck needed a repair they hadn't budgeted for. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself it was love. I graduated, got hired as a junior developer at a mid-sized software firm downtown, was promoted twice, and moved into a senior role at a financial technology company before I turned 27. My salary crossed 6 figures in the same month I got my hair cut, and cried in the car on the way home, because I couldn't explain why something that was supposed to feel like winning felt so much like standing still. By then I was sending my parents $800 a month, not because anyone had ever asked me to make it a fixed amount. It had just accumulated into that over time, the way water finds its own level. My brother hadn't launched the way anyone had hoped. He'd done 2 years of college, dropped out, worked a series of jobs that never quite stuck, and was still living at home at 30. My mother explained this in terms of the economy, the job market, his sensitive nature. She never explained why the economy and the job market had not similarly derailed me. I met my partner at a work conference in Toronto when I was 26. His name is Elliot. He's a civil engineer, patient in a way that initially confused me, because I'd grown up in a house where patience was something you performed, not something you actually felt. He watched me take my mother's calls for 2 years, before he sat down across from me one evening and said, very quietly, that he thought I was funding a dynamic that wasn't love. I didn't speak to him for 2 days after that. He waited, he was right. When I was 28, I decided to buy a place. Ottawa's market had done what Ottawa's market does, gone completely irrational. But I had been saving aggressively since my first promotion, and I had built up $47,000 for a down payment on a 1-bedroom condo in Centretown. It was not a flashy purchase. It was a second-floor unit in a building that needed a new lobby, and I loved it with a fierceness that surprised me. The day I got the keys, I sat on the bare hardwood floor with a Tim Hortons coffee and called my grandmother in Montreal, who is the only person in my family who has ever talked to me like I was a full human being, and she said, "Tu l'as mérité, ma belle." You earned it, sweetheart. I cried so hard I couldn't answer her. My parents knew about the purchase. My mother had offered at one point to help me find a place, which had meant sending me listings in the suburbs that were closer to their house than to my office. I had thanked her and done my own search. The money transfer, the notary appointment, all of it. I handled it myself. Elliot came with me to sign. We celebrated with groceries and pasta at my new kitchen table, which was a folding table I'd bought from a guy on Kijiji for $20. Celeste got engaged 8 months later to a man named Olivier, whose family owns a chain of pharmacies across eastern Ontario. Nice enough man. The kind of person who has never had to wonder about money, and therefore does not think about it very much. His family was pleasant but formal, and I could see from the first dinner that my mother was acutely aware of the gap between what they were and what she wanted them to think we were. The wedding was held at a hotel in downtown Ottawa. Grand ballroom, 180 guests, the kind of event that costs what a down payment costs, and I had been quietly informed, in that non-question tone, that the family was contributing $15,000, and that it would be wonderful if I could add something. I added $8,000. I did not mention this to Elliot until after I'd transferred it. He didn't say anything. He just looked at me for a long moment. The reception was beautiful, honestly. I'll give my mother that. The flowers were extraordinary, the food was excellent, and Celeste looked genuinely happy, which mattered to me in spite of everything. I was a bridesmaid. I wore a dusty blue dress that cost $340 that I paid for myself. I stood in the photos and smiled and meant some of it. Then came the toasts. My mother stood up maybe 45 minutes into the reception. This wasn't scheduled. I know because I had seen the itinerary. The MC had a running order, and the family toasts were supposed to happen after dinner, not during cocktail hour. She had simply decided to speak. She talked about Celeste's childhood. She talked about what a devoted mother she had been. She talked about the sacrifices the family had made to give their children the best possible foundation. Then she said, and I remember this exactly because I have replayed it probably 400 times. She said that the newlyweds were already building their future, and that Olivier's family had been so generous, and that their family, too, had been generous in their own way. She said that when Nomi bought her home, it was made possible by the family's support over the years, and wasn't it wonderful how a family lifts each other up? 200 people smiled and nodded. I felt the blood drain out of my face. Elliot found my hand under the table. He squeezed it once, hard. My brother, sitting 2 seats down, was already nodding along like this was common knowledge. My father was looking at his plate. He knows, I thought. He knows exactly what she just said, and he is looking at his plate. Olivier's mother, who was sitting at the head table, leaned over and said something to Olivier's father, and he nodded with this expression of warm recognition, like a piece of something had just clicked into place for him. Oh, so that's the kind of family they are. Generous, supportive, a family that pools its resources. I got up quietly and went to the bathroom. I stood at the sink and looked at myself in the mirror for a long time. I was 38 days from turning 29. I had a condo I owned. I had a career I had built from cashier shifts and overnight study sessions. I had a partner who had been quietly, patiently right about everything. And I was standing in a hotel bathroom in dusty blue taffeta, trying to decide whether to walk back out there and say something. I walked back out. I went to my mother's chair. I crouched down beside her so we were at the same level. Because I didn't want to make a scene and I didn't want to tower over her. And I said, in a voice I kept very even, that I needed to speak with her privately before the dinner service. She looked at me with this expression she has. Not alarm, not guilt, just a very mild surprise, like I'd asked her something slightly inconvenient. She said, not now, Nomi. I said, yes, now. She said she didn't understand what I was upset about. I said she had just told 200 people, including Olivier's family, that my down payment had come from family support. That was not true. I had the bank records. I had the wire transfer. I had every document. She blinked at me. Then she said something that I want you to hear, because it is the clearest summary of how she has operated my entire life. She said, well, we supported you emotionally. That's a form of support. You wouldn't have bought that place if you hadn't had us behind you. I looked at her for 3 full seconds. Then I stood up and went back to my seat. Elliot asked me what happened. I said, we're leaving after dinner and I need you to record the rest of the evening on your phone. Not publicly, just quietly. He didn't ask why. He just put his phone on the table with the camera facing the room. Because here's the thing about Elliot. He works in civil engineering, specifically in municipal infrastructure projects, and one of his contracts in the past 2 years had been with the city of Ottawa on a technology integration project. One of the vendors on that project was the firm that managed audiovisual and event recording services for several of the major hotel properties in downtown Ottawa, including this one. He knew from that contract that this hotel's event recording, backup footage from the ceiling-mounted wide-angle cameras used for security and event documentation, was stored on a cloud-based server and retained for 90 days. He had not said anything to my mother. He had not said anything to anyone. He just looked at me over the centerpiece and said, very quietly, "There are 4 cameras in this ballroom. The one above the head table has audio pickup." I cannot describe my mother's face in that moment because I wasn't looking at her. I was looking at Elliot. But my brother apparently went quite pale. We left after the cake cutting. The following Monday, I sent my mother an email. I had spent the weekend drafting it with Elliot, not because I needed help writing it, but because I needed someone to tell me when I had gone too far and when I hadn't gone far enough. The email was factual. I attached the bank statement showing the $47,000 withdrawal. I attached the wire transfer confirmation. I attached the notary's payment receipt with my name as the sole purchaser. I told her that what she had said at the reception was false, that it had been said in front of Olivier's family in a way that materially misrepresented my financial independence, and that I needed a full retraction. She did not respond to the email. My brother texted me 2 days later and said I was making this bigger than it needed to be and that Mom was really hurt. I did not respond to that text. My father called me the following Saturday morning. He's not a man who calls. This is maybe the 4th time in my adult life that my father has called me of his own initiative. He said that my mother hadn't meant it the way I was taking it. He said that she was proud of me and sometimes pride comes out wrong. He said that Olivier's family wasn't going to remember a toast. I said, "Dad, Olivier's mother made a comment to her husband within 10 seconds of hearing it." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "What do you want us to do?" I told him exactly what I wanted. I wanted a written statement, a message sent directly to Olivier's parents, copied to Celeste and Olivier, clarifying that the down payment on my home was purchased entirely by me, with no family contribution, and that my mother's comment at the reception had been a misunderstanding. He said he didn't think your mother would agree to that. I said, "Then I think we need to talk about some other things." Over the next week, I sent 3 letters. The first was to my bank, formally, requesting that the joint emergency contact I had listed on my savings account, my mother, be removed and replaced with Elliot. The second was to the telecommunications provider, where my family plan had been set up 7 years ago, when I had added my parents and brother to my account to save them money. I canceled their lines. I had paid for 3 of the 4 lines on that plan for 6 years. The third letter was not to a company. It was to my own accountant. I asked her to review the last 5 years of transfers I had made to my family and calculate the total, accounting for the $8,000 wedding contribution, the monthly transfers, and several one-time payments for things like my father's truck repair and my brother's dental work that I had quietly covered when asked. The number she came back with was $61,400. I did not share that number with my mother. I shared it with myself. I sat with it for a long time. I stopped the monthly transfers. I removed my parents from my phone plan. I did not return my brother's texts. I did not call on my mother's birthday, which was 3 weeks later. Elliot's family had invited us for Thanksgiving in Kingston, and that's where we went. Celeste called me in October. She was upset, which I understood. This was her marriage, her start, and I had created something that sat in the middle of it. I let her talk. She said that Olivier's mother had brought up the toast at a family dinner, not meanly, just in passing, asking about our family dynamics, and that Celeste had had to explain that there had been a miscommunication and that it had been awkward. I said, "It was a miscommunication created by Mom." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Did Mom really say that your money was family money?" I said yes. She said, "I didn't hear it that way." I said, "I know. But I was there, and Olivier's family was there, and now we both know what she meant." Celeste said she'd talked to Mom. I don't know exactly what happened in that conversation. What I know is that 3 weeks later, I received a message from my mother. It was short. It said that she realized her words at the reception might have given the wrong impression, and that she was sorry if that was hurtful. It also said, in the same message, that she felt I had been pulling away from the family for years, and that she hoped we could move forward. There was no mention of Olivier's parents. There was no factual correction. There was no statement. I forwarded the message to my accountant, my grandmother, and Elliot. I also saved it. Then I sat down and wrote a response. I said that I appreciated that she had reached out. I said that I was not interested in moving forward without a specific correction, and that I had no plans to resume the financial support I had been providing. I said that I love her, and that I was not interested in cutting contact permanently, but that the relationship as it had existed was no longer something I was available for. She did not respond. My brother sent me a voice note, which I did not listen to for 2 weeks. When I finally did, it was 8 minutes long and contained the information that I had always thought I was better than everyone, that money had changed me, that Mum was devastated, and that I had ruined Celeste's first year of marriage over a toast. I thought about responding. I thought about it for several days. Then I didn't. 6 months later, Elliot and I got engaged on a hiking trail in Gatineau Park on a Tuesday afternoon in early October when the maples were doing what they do, and the air smelled like cold and cedar, and everything I have ever wanted my life to feel like. I called my grandmother first. She cried. I cried. She said, "Mabel, you made it." I said I knew. I called my parents that evening. My mother answered. She congratulated me and asked when we were thinking of doing it. I said we hadn't decided. She said she hoped it wouldn't be too rushed. I said I would keep her posted. The call was 7 minutes long. There were no tears from her side. No asking about Elliot's family, no asking how I felt, no asking about the proposal. Just calendar questions and an observation that fall weddings were expensive. I was off the phone before I let myself feel the specific quiet grief of that. The kind that doesn't come from something breaking but from finally seeing clearly that it was never what you thought it was. My mother has not sent a correction to Olivier's parents. She likely never will. But Olivier's mother reached out to me directly. About 4 months after the wedding, after Celeste had apparently explained some version of the story. She is a warm, straightforward woman. And she sent me a message on Instagram that said simply that she admired how I had built what I had built. And that she hoped we would get to know each other properly over time. I read that message 4 times. I still send it to myself on hard days. What I want to tell you, and I'm saying this to whoever out there right now is watching this from wherever you are, whatever time it is, because you found this video for a reason, is that I didn't blow up my family over a toast. I did not leave over a single comment at a reception. I left because of what that comment revealed. When my mother stood up in that ballroom and folded my work, my years, my overnight shifts and my student loans, and my quiet deposits and my 4 years of saving, into a family narrative she could hand to Olivier's family like a gift she'd wrapped herself. She showed me something she'd always believed, that my effort was a resource that belonged to the group, that my success was something she had standing in, that the story of my life was also her story to tell. It wasn't anger that made me leave. It was clarity. The condo is mine. The down payment was mine. The $61,400 I sent home over a decade is gone. And I've made peace with that, because I sent it freely and I sent it hoping for something I now understand I was never going to get. Elliot and I have started talking about what we want, seriously want, for our life. We're looking at a townhouse in Westboro. We're talking about a dog. We're talking about children. Eventually, in that careful, hopeful way, you talk about things that feel real but still a little tender. My grandmother came to stay with us for a week in January, and slept on the pull-out, in my spare room, and made tourtière from scratch in my kitchen, and called me Ma Belle every single morning. That week felt more like family than most of my childhood. I want to ask you something before you go. Do you think I went too far? A lot of people, when they hear about the phone plan and the transfers and the birthday I didn't call, they get quiet. My mother didn't invent money or steal from an account. She said a few sentences at a party, but she said them knowing they weren't true, in front of people whose opinion she was actively managing, about my life, my money, my name, about something I had earned in ways she had watched and never once asked about. What would you have done? Tell me in the comments. I read them all, and if any part of this felt familiar to you, if you've ever been the capable one, the one who handles it, the one whose achievements get absorbed into someone else's story, please subscribe. New stories go up every week, and I mean this. You are not alone, and you are not too much, and what you built is yours.